Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast, created by Jeff Siegel, proudly hosted by Jeremy Plonk, representing First Bet and Express Bet. And we'll take on 5 hot topics this week, as we do each and every week here on the show. Of course, it's a transitionary week, if you will, in racing. Opening day at Oaklawn Park in Hot Springs, Arkansas, coming up on Friday. It'll be closing weekend at Woodbine and also at Los Alamitos in Southern California. So the calendar continues to change this time of year, and certainly want to welcome those of you watching from Arizona this week at the Global Symposium of Racing at the University of Arizona, the racetrack industry program, gathering movers and shakers and hopefully getting some things done in Arizona this weekend to better the game. We'll talk about some of that in just a moment. But as we do each and every week here on the podcast, we're going to get things started with our Goosebump Award, the horse who got us up out of our chair, got us most excited about racing this past week, and a Goosebump Award winner this week who may have Kentucky Oaks aspirations. If you didn't see the Demoiselle Stakes Saturday at Aqueduct, it was a zany finish, and I mean zany the filly.
Brad Ortiz Jr. just took a look in behind, and Zaney reaches the top of the stretch, and Zaney comes calling for the lead. Schilling will battle on towards the inside, lugging in there with Zaney, who approaches a final furlong, and Zaney starts to run away. Jumping the gun concurrently. They are battling on here for second and third, but Zaney has a 16th left to go, and she's a talented filly. Zaney dominates in the Demoiselle. Jumping the gun second, then came concurrently, and Schilling in 1 minute 50.
No challenge there for Zaney. Now 2 for 2 lifetime. She debuted a winner at Gulfstream Park. Interestingly enough, for this time of year, you think maybe you stay down there for the championship meet if you're Todd Pletcher and Rapoli stable, but they bring her back to New York. So she ships north. She punches her ticket towards a big Kentucky Oaks prep next. That's a 3-year-old. A really good performance there. She was a 2-length. She ran 2 lengths faster than they did in the Remsen Stakes for the boys. We'll talk about that race in a little bit later in the show. So when the fillies outrun the boys, you're doing something good. She's a $350,000 daughter of American Pharaoh. The damn Mo Green won the grade 3 top flight in New York at 9 furlongs. So distance, absolutely no problem at all for Zaney as she ran away with this one back on November 2nd. Super Corridor, the winner of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies right now, probably the top of the division off of that victory in Southern California at Del Mar, but certainly Super Corridor has got company with Zaney, the winner of the Demoiselle, at the top of the 3-year-old filly division here coming up in a couple weeks when all the horses celebrate their birthdays. She will be one to watch. Zaney, big-time winner of the Demoiselle, and this week's Goosebump Award winner. Now, as we go to our second topic this week on the show, there's a big divide in American society, world society, if you will, between the haves and the have-nots. So it's not surprising that we have that in horse racing as well. Some bad news to report here, and sad news, really, in terms of the history and the historical significance of the racetrack in British Columbia known as Hastings Park. Hastings Park closed last week after 133 years of business. Hastings Park will not run a meet in 2026, and sad to see that one go. They had struggled with field size for the past several years, despite having slot machine operations there and the casino operations. Now the government in British Columbia ruled just a couple weeks back that they will not be supporting racing in purses with those slots and casino subsidies any longer. So forced to do it all on their own and with simulcast revenue, and the field sizes what they were at Hastings, they decided to close the doors and shutter the track again after 133 years. Really disappointing to see that. And of course, we've seen some track closures over the past year or so. Golden Gate Fields, Freehold on the harness side. And of course, you go back to the closings of Calder and Arlington and some major racing venues here. Laurel Park will go by the wayside in another year or two to run exclusively at Pimlico as the plan of the new Maryland Thoroughbred Racing Authority. So a lot of change. I think contrition is something that's necessary, a contraction, I should say, necessary in the game of horse racing to be successful, to get down to the right market size, to just have so many tracks running so many dates with the horse population down as it is, the customer base shrunk as it has been over the past several decades. I think there's just going to be some natural pain in the game, and the haves and the have-nots are definitely going 2 different directions. You look at the haves, tracks like Oaklawn and opens on Friday, they're adding dates every year, it seems like, and getting their meet bigger because of that great hotel and casino slot subsidy that they have there with the casino operation right on track at Oaklawn Park. And, the NYRA circuit has certainly benefited from the casino at Aqueduct over the years without any question. Kentucky racing has been just a complete renaissance with the historical racing machines and casinos around the state of Kentucky that offer those HHRs, and how that has made Kentucky Downs what it is, has boosted the purses at Ellis, at Keeneland, at Churchill Downs. And now we're seeing that at Turfway. Turfway's kind of having, a renaissance of its own. It's probably never been stronger winter racing at Turfway Park as it is right now. So the haves are doing well. The have-nots are struggling. And as we see, and the decoupling talk in Florida, of course, would be very dangerous situation there. We see with the decoupling that happened in British Columbia, how quickly that led to the demise of Hastings Park. So a lot to think about. And you look at New York as well. I mean, the new Belmont Park going to open in the fall of 2026 next year. They ran the last edition of some of the major stakes races at Aqueduct this year, barring some sort of delay in the construction and the opening at Belmont Park. We don't expect to be back to Aqueduct in the fall of 2026 or the winter of 2026-27. So at Aqueduct, they have the casino there on the grounds, and the racing tied to the casino operation, of course, in New York. That is expected to continue by law, but when you start to take the casino away from the racetrack and all the racing operation moves to Belmont, and they keep Aqueduct proper, the grounds there at Aqueduct as a resorts casino property, you just wonder how safe you really are and how much thin ice you're walking on as a racing organization. It only takes a few politicians to kind of shake things up and really change the landscape of things. So, in New York, they look safe for now, and it's certainly been a big boon to the thoroughbred racing industry. But again, there are no guarantees when you're depending on second subsidies for another industry, a second industry subsidies to subsidize your own. So the haves and the have-nots, the gap getting larger and larger in horse racing. I think the attrition that we're going to see and the contraction that we're going to see in number of racetracks probably only destined to continue. I think there is an optimum number of racetracks. What exactly that number looks like depends on the levels of racing, obviously. But at the higher levels of racing, perhaps two circuits running at the same time and in different parts of the country is enough to keep things going around the country. A B level underneath that, with racing, so that a racing schedule during the day kind of goes from noon till 11 p.m., sort of thing like that. 11, 12-hour race day, sun up, sun down, for simulcast purposes and for ADW purposes, and then international content, quarter horses, harness and stuff, certainly filling in the gaps for the betting providers like a First Bet and Express Bet, that sort of thing, the ADW market. But the number of live races that we're going to see in the U.S. run continues to drop, and I think it'll continue to fall as we move forward. But the divide between the haves and the have-nots was on full display in the past week with the closing of Hastings Park after 133 years in operation. We move to our third topic this week, and we keep the theme going in terms of news and trends in the industry. The post-Breeders' Cup season is getting bowled over is the headline, and kind of combining two different things that are going on in racing and sports right now. College football playoff teams were announced over the past weekend, and then the bowl games certainly came up right after that. The teams who didn't make the 12-team playoff, which bowl games would they be going to? And quickly you saw 10 major brands have opted out of bowl games and don't even want to play in bowl games at this time. So the landscape in college football is changing, and the landscape in horse racing has certainly changed since the institution of the Breeders' Cup in 1984, and even more so now. These post-Breeders' Cup major stakes races just don't have the same zip to them that they once did. I bring the topic up this week because we're on the heels of the Cigar Mile, and we'll review the race that was run this past weekend, the Cigar Mile, but it's a shadow of its former self with the big-time horses that were expected in that race over the years and have won the Cigar Mile. It was just kind of like a grade 3 kind of field this year, downgraded from a grade 1 to a grade 2 in the past few seasons, and really trending towards a grade 3 and a race that's losing relevance. And a lot of the late season races have lost relevance for the older horses because everything is about building towards the Breeders' Cup. You've got the great winter racing at the beginning of the year, Gulfstream, Santa Anita, Oaklawn, Fairgrounds, and then in through the summer, and everybody's peaking towards Saratoga and Del Mar after passing through the Triple Crown, of course. And then it's up to Keeneland in October in the Breeders' Cup. The Kentucky Downs folks ready for their big purse money in September. But once you hit that Breeders' Cup, Halloween weekend, first week in November, after that, the kind of breaks kind of come off, and there's not a lot there in terms of big-time horses that want to be running this time of year based on their connections. And the more time that people want between races and the gaps and the spacing between races that they want for the various number of reasons that are included in that we've talked to over the years, whether it's the value of the horses, whether it's the big purse money, whether it's the medications that they're using and the withdrawal times that are involved in that, a lot of different reasons for the number of races being reduced amongst horses. The sturdiness of the breed is also tossed around as one of those reasons. But as horses make fewer and fewer starts, there's less interest in running them in November and December at the end of the season. And we saw that with the Cigar Mile. I mean, we take a look at the Cigar Mile field in there, Doc Sullivan, Mika, Pentathlon. That was half of the field for the Cigar Mile. Crazy Mason, Brazenly, Phileas Fogg, a former claimer, and Bishop's Bay, the eventual winner in there. Bishop's Bay, probably the only horse in that field that you would say absolutely positively a grade 2 type horse. Phileas Fogg kind of on the borderline of that. Crazy Mason on the borderline of that. But certainly no grade 1 types left at the end of the season to run in the Cigar Mile. And it was a win for the horse that we talked about, Bishop's Bay, probably the class of the field as the favorite. Let's go back and show you the Cigar Mile. We'll talk a little bit about Bishop's Bay and what might be next for him, but there's not a lot cooking at the end of the season, and this is an example of that. Bishop's Bay in the Cigar Mile.
Left to go right here at Aqueduct in the Cigar Mile, and it's a big long shot in Mika who's trying to upset this field. Bishop's Bay is in full pursuit, but Mika is showing no signs of stopping so far. Bishop's Bay will have to dig deep inside to catch this long shot Mika. Mika has a 16th left to get, but here comes Bishop's Bay with every single stride. It's gonna be Bishop's Bay to get up and win the Cigar.
So Bishop's Bay gets up over Mika. Mika had 8 prior starts, only one of them in stakes company, the Juvenile Mile as a 2-year-old at Kentucky Downs. Mika certainly not a horse who had ever seen a graded stakes race. Almost pulled off the Cigar Mile there. Caught in the shadow of the wire by Bishop's Bay, who's really an underrated runner. 13 career starts now for Bishop's Bay. 9 wins, 3 seconds. Brad Cox and company have really shipped around nicely and spotted this horse in winnable places. They're going to get bold next time with Bishop's Bay. Horse who was really only outrun once in his career. That's when they did try to take a big bite and go for the grade 1 forego at Saratoga, and he ran up the track that day. The next time we might see him could be in the Saudi Cup. They're looking to stretch him out, maybe to 1 1/8, the 2-turn race. The Saudi Cup could be next up for Bishop's Bay, and that would certainly be a major rise in class for him, and we'll see where he stacks up in a grade 1 race when he would get to that point. But late in the season, again, it's just there's not the interest in these late season stakes races, just like the bowl games at the end of the college football season. Too much money, too much emphasis on the championships, which roll in through the Breeders' Cup and not much beyond. For me, I think we would be looking at a situation where we might be better off that there are no graded stakes races scheduled after the Breeders' Cup except for 2-year-olds. The 2-year-old season, you get the late blooming 2-year-olds and horses who want to roll into the fall. I think there's a great spot for races like the Kentucky Jockey Club last week at Churchill, the Remsen last week or 2 weeks ago at Churchill, last week where we saw the Remsen in New York. Still races on the calendar like the Los Al Futurity coming up this weekend, the Springboard Mile at Remington Park. I think there's a good place for late season 2-year-old races that could potentially be graded stakes races. But as for the older horses, I wouldn't put anything in graded stakes company beyond the Breeders' Cup. I think we'd be better off shrinking those big major graded stakes races earlier in the calendar in the first 10 months, get them all out of the way into the championships of the Breeders' Cup, and then we just kind of reset towards next year when we get into these November and December racing. November and December racing certainly important to the bottom line. It's important to the gambler. We like to watch races and handicap good competitive races throughout the course of the entire calendar year, 52 weeks of season. But I don't think we need graded stakes for the older horses this time of year in November and December. over. Tell me what you think in the comments, and also be sure to like and share out this podcast as we go through it. Help us continue to grow the audience for the It's Official podcast. But that's my take on the post Breeders' Cup season getting bowled over. It's kind of similar to what we're seeing with the bowl games. Now, we talked about the importance of 2-year-old races this time of year, and that brings us to our fourth topic on the big board. It is the Remsen Stakes. Will the Remsen Stakes resume its run? This is a race that kind of struggled from the mid-90s until a couple years ago, then got back on the beam with really big additions in 2021 and 2023. 2022, though, and 2024 in between were kind of duds. Well, after watching this race last week, I want to say the Remsen could get back on a pretty good run because I think the top two, Paladin and Renegade, are two we want to watch next year on that chase towards the Kentucky Derby.
We're approaching a quarter mile left to go. Balboa and Day One Starter are still there. Renegade and Paladin, they hook up again on the grandstand side. It's Balboa who's in front. Paladin and Renegade battling on in between horses, and the boys are at it again. It's Paladin and Renegade. They've got a 16th left to go. Paladin to the outside edge is clear. Paladin will win the Grade 2 Remsen. Paladin wins it over Renegade. Balboa finished third.
The boys were back at it. A good call there from Chris Griffith. He had all the calls there this weekend from Aqueduct here on the podcast. Thanks to he lending his voice to the show. Paladin and Renegade, they had run against each other as intimated in the race call once before, October 17th, in a mutual debut for both. There was a lot of consternation after that race with the disqualification. Renegade won that day. Paladin was the runner-up. Then the disqualification flipped the result in there, and then they got the rematch in the Remsen Stakes. The order of finish under the wire flipped, but the official order stayed the same. Once again, it was Paladin, the 9-5 favorite, defeating Renegade in here at 5-2. Chad Brown over Todd Pletcher with two very well-bred horses who are bred to get distance as we go further down the Triple Crown Trail. This feels a lot more like the 2021 and 2023 Remsens that we saw when there were horses like Mo Donegal, Sierra Leone, Dornick, a couple Belmont Stakes winners in there, a horse of the year in Sierra Leone, a horse who won the Breeders' Cup Classic. So this is a situation, not a horse of the year in Sierra Leone, but a champion 3-year-old in Sierra Leone who won the Breeders' Cup Classic last year as a sophomore. So this feels a lot more like that to me. High-level competition, high-level horses, the great pedigrees. Now, they didn't come home particularly fast in this race, 38-2 over the final 3 furlongs, but that wasn't totally pedestrian. They were about 2 lengths slower than we saw Zany earlier on the podcast in her smashing win in the Des Moselle. So maybe it wasn't the fastest edition in the world, but again, 2-year-olds going 9 furlongs this late in the season. There's not a lot that want to go that kind of trip, and so Paladin and Renegade both showed that they can run decently well, I think, for this level of competition, that kind of distance this early in the year, and I think they're both headed to Florida next. I don't know if we'll see them match head-to-head against each other. It would seem like Todd Pletcher's got some work to do with how he wants to separate his posse. He's got quite a few good-looking 2-year-olds turning 3 that'll all be stabled down around Gulfstream Park, Palm Beach Downs, but where they end up and through Palm Meadows, where they end up in terms of their racing as 3-year-olds, they could be on the road. Pletcher certainly, and Brown as well, certainly supports the Fairgrounds Series, races like the LeCompte, the Risen Star, and the Louisiana Derby in that sequence down in New Orleans. Both places frequented by Pletcher and by Brown. We could see these two horses again against each other along the Triple Crown Trail, but not necessarily. The other thing with Paladin is too, not Paladin, but rather Renegade, because he was disqualified in that maiden race, he came back in the stakes and ran second. He's still eligible for a maiden special weight. So if they want to give him a little bit of time off and then bring him back in an easy maiden race, say late February, something like that, and then just go the one final prep route with him in a grade 1 and just try to make your hay that way at the end of the Triple Crown prep season, that's on the table too. He still has that maiden condition about him. It just depends how hard they want to knuckle down on the campaign and how easy they want to take it on Renegade and just try to get to the Kentucky Derby. The one thing about Renegade, I think we're going to see him sooner than later as a 3-year-old though, because he only had 2 prep races, 2 workouts going into this race, into the Remsen Stakes. You look at that gap since those 2 horses ran back on November the 17th, there were 5 workouts for Paladin between that start and what we saw in the Remsen this past weekend. Only 2 workouts. They missed at least 1 workout, Todd Pletcher said, but they were late getting back to the workout tab compared to Paladin after their maiden special weight matchup. So 5 workouts to 2, and the the gap was only a 2-length difference over the course of a mile and an eighth. You could make the argument once again, even though he got the short end of the final result stick in here, that the horse you kind of want out of the Remsen Stakes might still be Renegade. Again, he was 3 works short of the horse who beat him by only 2 lengths. So we'll see how it turns out in the spring, and hopefully they can get more into him and he's a little hardier and he can work more consistently. That could be a problem with Renegade moving forward, but could also be a boost that tells you he's really talented, because he was cranked up harder. Maybe he wins that Remsen Stakes over his rival Paladin. 2 good-looking 2-year-olds, though. Will the Remsen turn out more like 2021 and 2023, or the past couple of years where Poster won it last year and didn't do a whole lot? W&L won it in 2022 and didn't end up doing a whole lot. I think it's more like 2021 and 2023. We're looking for Mo Donegal, Sierra Leone, Dornick-type performances as 3-year-olds out of both Paladin and Renegade, 2 horses to watch on the Triple Crown Trail. We'll add another one for your horses to watch in our Stars of Tomorrow segment, as we do each and every week here on the podcast. Our 5th and final topic takes us to that Stars of Tomorrow, where Schoolyard Superman was on the undercard Remsen Day, going a 1-turn mile. The son of Justify led him wire to wire, and looks like a good one for trainer Chad Brown.
Miracle ranging up on the outside, but Schoolyard Superman is sprinting away. Schoolyard Superman's got more and hugs the rail and kicks away up by 4. 5 lengths now. Mr. Miracle to the outside of Buntis Folklora. Double act trying to run on. Schoolyard Superman is approaching the final 16th and soaring away. Schoolyard Superman. Manny Franco dominant in victory. Schoolyard Superman wins it over Buntis Folklora. Mr. Miracle double
5 3/4 lengths, the final margin there for the son of Practical Joke out of a Tis Now mare. The Practical Jokes typically better around 1 turn. This was a 1-turn mile, 136.68. Not smashingly fast in there. They got the final quarter, a solid enough 20-4 and 3 though. But the Tis Now mare on the dam side should bring some stamina for Schoolyard Superman. We'll see this one maybe in Allowance Company down at Gulfstream, maybe in the Stakes Company. We'll see what Chad Brown does as he tries to separate some of his cast towards the class of 2026 on the Kentucky Derby Trail. That was the 3rd career start for Schoolyard Superman. Clipped heels and fell, and the debut when bet down, heavily bet in the career debut, then came back and ran a good second on October 26th, made the natural rise and progression here in the 3rd career start with a breakout victory. Look forward to seeing Schoolyard Superman as a 3-year-old to watch next season. Now let's take a look at the 5 topics this week in review on the It's Official podcast. This week's Goosebump Award winner was Zany, won the Demoiselle Stakes by 8.5 lengths to move to 2 for 2 and maybe favoritism for this year's Kentucky Oaks. The divide between the haves and the have-nots has never been more clear. Last week, the sad news that 133 years of racing at Hastings Park would be no more. We talked about the impact of the casino and slots purses that are making some of the tracks just flourish right now in their gaming and in their racing purse money, while some of the other tracks are suffering and falling by the wayside. Decoupling of the casino and racing operation, the downfall there in British Columbia for Hastings Park. The post-Breeders' Cup getting bowled over discussion was how there's no good horses left, it seems, for the older handicap races late in the year. A soft edition of the Cigar Mile by its lofty standards, and what a great race that's been over the years, but a dull edition this year, taken in hand by our Bishop's Bay, rallying to win that one and getting up and heading maybe towards Saudi Arabia next. Will the Remsen resume its run? I thought Paladin and Renegade are 2 promising 2-year-olds ready to turn 3. I think this race could get back to the form that it showed when Sierra Leone, Dornick, and Mo Donegal came out of it in recent years. Paladin and Renegade, 2 to watch for trainer Chad Brown and for Todd Pletcher. And speaking of Chad Brown, he had your star of tomorrow, Schoolyard Superman, winner of race number 2 on Saturday on the undercard of the Remsen. This is a colt by Practical Joke. Schoolyard Superman, our star of tomorrow. Those 5 topics are now official because our handicapper emeritus Jeff Siegel and I say so. That's the way we created the game, and that's the way we play it each and every week. I'll be back next week with 5 more topics and talk about horse racing. We'll have a complete rundown of the Global Symposium of Racing from Arizona and talk a lot more about the panels, a lot talked about today on call wagering and other topics around the industry. We'll have a full recap of what went on in Arizona and our 2 cents on those topics on next week's program. Until then, have a great week, everybody. I'll be back on Friday to handicap some weekend stakes races. When the First Call podcast returns, Scott Shapiro and I will take a look at the races this weekend, including the Turfway Championships for the synthetic surfaces coming up this weekend. Also, big racing at Oaklawn Park on the opening weekend of the season in Hot Springs. Have a great week, everyone.